And once again, look at that. The video clips work. Hello and welcome everybody to 40K Frontiers episode 21, Northside, STRONGSIDE. With us today, we've got a special guest, Mr. Will Milton. How you doing, buddy?
Hey guys, I'm good. Just a long day at work, getting home, cracking open a beer, having some dinner. Keen to chat about some 40K with you boys.
Happy days.
Nice.
What more could you want? That's the Australian dream, right?
Exactly, mate. Exactly.
And as always, the ever reliable, the ever beautiful and ever handsome, Mr. Towse. How you doing, buddy?
Yeah, good. I'm happy because I just got that the episode title is like a Remember the Titans reference, right? So yeah, that made me happy. Yeah, you're like reading like, oh, that's what we've called it. This one. This makes me happy. That movie's great. That's one of the ones I go to like rotate through to put on the background when I'm doing hobby stuff. So yeah, it's a good time.
Good movie. Well, we did have a King of the North, but then when we talked to the Northern Ireland guys, and someone actually won an event in Northern Ireland, it's like, I think I still do King of the North. But yeah, as we have on here, so Will Milton, so he's one of the dudes at TNA, so Northside Alliance, so one of the Northern Brisbane, Queensland boys, and he obviously like a very
one of the Northern blokes.
One of the Northern blokes. that should be that. That's what you say. Northside Alliance. Was it Northside? Not Northside Alliance.
Northside Bloke Alliance.
Yeah, that one. But
that's our mixed team event name when we do 50-50. So yeah,
there you go. Anyways, we're going on tangents. But on us today, so we're here to talk to Will Milton. So he's a recent inductee in the Australian WTC team, and also just talk about some of the recent shenanigans and stuff that's been going on. But before we dive deep into everything, Mr. Towse, what's been happening with you?
What's been happening with? I have been busy not putting out the final version of the players pack for my event because I'm good at things. Whoopsies. I should do that so people can pay me the money to go along. But I've been making a bit of terrain for it. Have I done? I don't think I've done any hobby stuff since like it took. Look, I think on Monday, and it's currently Wednesday, I unpacked my Adelaide army. I was like, I should get around to that, hey, because I've got a flat inspection the next day. And otherwise, like TTS tournament stuff, the Copenhagen teams thing for Team New Zealand, that's our like, yeah, this is practice. We're just like working things out because we don't have like a winning system to just jump into and be like, oh yeah, people here know what they're doing, right, Will?
Yeah, I get you.
I think that's it. I was briefly trying to see if I could go to either the Manchester like UKTC event or the same weekend there's a thing in France, and because I've got some travel for uni that just sort of sprung up, I'm like, okay, cool, I'll take some free that, but couldn't quite make the turnaround to make it to one of them. I think that's me. I'm probably forgetting some stuff, but hey.
Nice, man.
What about you, Will? What's been happening with yourself? So I understand, obviously, as part of the discussion, we'll talk about First Blood, the recent 40K event you guys ran, but what's been happening with yourself?
Look, man, just kind of hopping into the new season. Queensland's got some pretty cool events coming up this year. We've worked together to kind of create this cool calendar of having like a big event every month. And really highlight what's going to be like a Masters event for Queensland, and the Oceanic League's kicking off in Australia and New Zealand. And luckily, we've got some cool stuff in the works with Josh McGowan and Josh Diffie on that stuff. So yeah, that's the main parts there. Locally, just playing events, playing Friday nights, playing games with the boys, practicing with the Queensland team. Just all the works and jacks, just back into it. Back into the fresh season.
You are still grinding them nights?
To be confirmed. They're testing different things, but secret squirrel business. So yeah.
Aw, boo. But fair.
He is playing something. He's playing a 40K faction for sure. Can confirm. But yes, more on the fair. And obviously, so Will obviously alluded to there. So part of the Queensland team. So obviously in May every year, like all the Australian states and territories get together for ANZ Team Champs. And Will last year filled in. I'm sure we might touch on it a little bit later. But
sure we will.
In, now he's actually he's an actual inductee this year. So congrats for that. So and I guess for myself, so moved into a new place. So up not too far away from Will. So
welcome to Queensland, mate.
Exactly. Thank you. So toughing out another time zone change. So now Frontiers is back to 4 different time zones. Perfect. So it's great. And then just like getting used to settling into a new place, but all things going well. And yeah, so firstly, talk about Will. So before we get stuck into the deep side of things, how did you get into 40k and like sort of how long have you been playing? Because from my understanding, you actually only recently got in.
Yeah, man. So, for perspective, like the long/short version or the long version is, as a kid, like many people, played Dawn of War. I think a lot of people did. I know Sam. I think I've heard you say that. I'm guessing Towse by the nodding you're the same, right?
Yeah, I'm sure we had like I think there was a version because it was back when games were on discs. I had a version from a friend that we installed on the family computer and then gave the disc back, and then I think my brother got one at some point. I did get massively into it, but yeah.
Yeah. Oh, look, I didn't play the tabletop. I just played it with a mate of mine and another friend. There was three of us, and sadly, my friend passed away in high school. And I ended up moving into home, moving into a house with my other mate, and in 2018, 2019, something around then, he decided to pick up some Warhammer because he was like, hanging out as a young adult. We're both in uni. He just wanted something to pass time. And I'm like, oh, that's kind of cool. And I saw what a Necron was, and I'm like, oh, that's really cool. So this is like, or just the end of 8th kind of thing, like kind of before the Space Marine supplements, just where Custodian's beta rules was out. Not that I knew all that stuff at the time, but I can reference the time frame now. And bought the Crons. Was trying to find a group for a little while to hang out and play with. I was playing with my mate, but I kept smashing him because I'm a competitive person by nature, right? Yeah, that stuff happens. He got a little bit sick of it. He was playing Space Marines and Death Guard. I'm like, here's my Necrons with my Doomsday Arcs. And he's like, what are these vehicles? Why do they do so much damage? Meanwhile,
that was back when they like pooped the big AoE of Mortal Wounds when you had the 3 planes, right?
Yeah, it would have been. I didn't even know what a plane was at the time, but yeah, 100% was at the same time period. Yeah. So here I was playing a few friends that we'd play locally, thinking I was like, all right. Then managed to find the group of the boys that eventually became TNA at a local store, and the club president Reese, he had Crimson Fists. This is just as they had, I can't remember the name of the book, but the Psychic Awakening book come out, and I got completely dumpstered in like 2 turns. The Imperial Fist just deleted me off the table, and I'm like, what's going on here? What's happened? Had a few more games like that. I'm like, oh, this is really cool. Like I'm loving getting my head kicked in, but I'm really enjoying going hard and getting better at 40k. Then COVID hit, and we kind of like went off the radar. And I'm like, oh, I'll just go back into uni. And then the tournament scene kicked off. I found out about that, and I'm like, you know what? I'm going to give this a go. Bought some custodes because someone was selling them cheap. Had some fun with them, and then in 2021, Josh McGowan ran the Gladiator Games like tournament circuit essentially in Queensland. It was like a GT every month or a teams event every month. It was awesome. And I decided I'm going to pick up Raven Guard because I had them for a little bit at the end of 8th, and stuck with them for a year and went really hard. And that's kind of how I ended up playing 40k and just loving it. So yeah.
Got stuck right in.
Yeah, man.
Yeah. And so Brisbane, pretty good area because you're the north side of Brisbane, yeah?
Yeah, correct.
Yeah. Brisbane, pretty good area for 40k. So you go there, go to events, get your teeth kicked in, right? And you start to be like, oh, that's pretty good. Oh, I need this to be better, and yada yada yada. Yeah. And you get to be, a bit of a menace, right?
Yeah, well, my first event, mate, I ended up playing, I think it was my first or my second. It was a team's event. I ended up playing Brian Lakeland. He's one of the normal blokes guys. He's been a state level player before and potentially, higher things too. And he kicked my crap in with Harlequins. And I'm like, oh my God, I thought custodes were meant to be like these most durable things. And you kind of learn real quick that it's not about what the law says and what you perceive it to be, but it's about the game mechanics and all the staging, positioning, all those components too. So you're 100% right. Like, Queensland's caliber of player is very high, dare I say, one of the highest in the world based on our WTC team performance and our location. So yeah, you end up facing those top tier boys very quickly and learn a lot. So good opportunities, but also very hard to play in because of it. So yeah.
Absolutely, definitely a shark's den. So, like, how did you sort of describe the sort of come up and learning? So, obviously, you got into the game quite recently, and you've had a great historic rise to fame per se. I would say, and like gotten very, very good quickly. I know you had. So, for context, you had a competitive video game background playing Battlefield and stuff like that. So, I know you had that competitive environment behind. But like, what's it about the Queensland scene that you think makes it such a really good environment and you're able to sort of accelerate as a player?
Yeah, so there's a few factors. The key ones, primarily, I'd say, is we have a really good community focus. Like Queensland, we don't have many people that clash too much. Like there's always politics in communities, but there's no one like hating each other. There's no groups like, we don't want to play with them, we don't interact with them. Everyone's kind of friendly and quite nice. And most people give you the time of day. And if you ask for a game, most people give you a game. Like if you ask Liam or Eric or those guys, if you're keeping up and you're doing okay, they will give you a game most of the time, and you can kind of learn from them and get a foot in the door. The main thing's attitude, though. I find like a lot of the Queenslanders are very focused on just improving and getting better, and not necessarily about their own performance, because that like performance is important, but like attitude of like growth and that mindset is super key. And a lot of Queenslanders share that, and that's what I find. Like we give each other a lot of crap, as every Australian does, but we all get down and like knuckle into the work and try and find the things that are unique and different and then work well. And especially in Australia, our terrain, as you guys would know, is pretty different. Not different. It's a lot denser than what most countries would say. So we get the opportunity to test more melee orientated lists. Oh yeah, this is some of the maps we've been running at TNA for events. They've been pretty cool. Yeah.
Just quickly on the scene up there helping out, would you say, because there's sort of that core group of like a few really competitive individuals, right? And they're like grinding, pushing to get as good as they can, right? It just means it's a bit like rising tide lifts all ships, right? They they go to the events and they set the standard, right? Like they'll go along, they'll play, and when they're playing, the other like the higher end, right? They'll play the people that are going X and 1, X and 2, right? As they knock each other out and down, and then those people start to pick up that stuff, and it filters down, yeah.
Yeah, totally.
Like, would that be?
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I'd say that's 100% the case. Like, your X and 1, X and 2 players in Queensland are actually pretty solid players in general. I'm not saying they aren't everywhere else, but like a lot of these guys could go to most other players and potentially win a GT or win an RTT pretty comfortably. So you're battling that skill level the whole way up. So people have to turn on pretty quickly. Personally, within myself, I'd say the main thing that lead to like getting good very quickly is I picked an army, which is a Raven Guard, and with like mainly Vanguard vets and Redemptors, and stuck to it for a whole year. Played like 120, 130 games with it, learning like the advanced mechanics of combat and advanced charge, and ended up going 6-2 at the first time I went to Uprising, first interstate event in 2022. Yeah, 2022. And yeah, like you kind of push yourself and you learn these little minutiae things, and when you finally get into a dex that is actually good, you can kind of go, oh, I can use these skills now that I've learned on a harder dex, and you have to get every little ounce out of to make it good. So yeah.
Fantastic. And so as we talked about before, so you said you sort of have a unique sort of terrain there, and similar. So you guys in the TNA use a sort of a hybrid system, I understand, of the Uprising terrain. So obviously the stuff that Adam Napier has produced, and the WT system. So on screen here for people who aren't watching the podcast, we've got a sort of the terrain map pack that the First Blood event used. And so yeah, do you want to sort of describe sort of what the event used in terms of terrain and like sort of how it operated and like what the terrain tries to do? And we'll show also photos of the real life event as well.
Completely, man. Yeah. So it kind of started in TNAO last year, which is our big event that TNA puts on, the TNA Open. And we spent a bit of time going, okay, we've played in the Uprising terrain, which most people should hopefully know. It's a big event in Australia and one of the like premier events in Australia that gets global recognition. And they have some really cool terrain setups. And especially in 2022, it's quite heavy. This year was a little bit more open. We kind of built on that, and playing for Queensland Coach last year, which I was lucky enough to get a role in, I got to play in the WTC Awards, and I hadn't had a chance to really play that type of terrain before, and we decided to mix the two. So we started to introduce a few more crates, and like always focused on having a place to deploy safely, which is kind of a WTC premise. I was hearing you guys talk to Isik this morning, and that's one of the things he said. Ironically, I didn't even know that, but like we always try and have two Ls or a safe L and a big solid WTC L and a deployment zone. Little bit of risk into the objectives, but then the corresponding objective on your like your north side or south side, depending on what playing your side, we try to have that relatively safe. But then if you want to risk and assault the enemy, you've got to push out. The main rule we kind of stick to is everything's at least 6 inches apart, 4 to 6 inches apart. So you can't just like hop assault armies pretty comfortably on the board. And it gives shooting armies a chance to do stuff, but at the same time, it doesn't mean assault armies are screwed if they only move like slow, like Death Guard or things like that. So yeah, the terrain premise is the maps actually we made. That's the first time we've run them officially like that. It was kind of testing for upcoming events this year, and The feedback we got was amazing. People absolutely loved them. Like, it was a good mix of like each shooting army could do well, but also combat armies could could push up pretty hard and get in there. As we can see, Liam Hackett, everyone should know him. He did pretty well at our first blood with the Soul Watch. So yeah.
So because it's speaking of heads, BNY might be jumping in.
Hey.
Yeah. So when you were saying about terrain, and the hybrid of Adelaide and WTC sort of stuff, or Adam Napier, I guess, terrain. Because that was something that was, I guess, maybe slightly controversial at Uprising this year. How do you do bases and lips on the terrain? Because I know that's like coming from outside of WTC, the way that they have the terrain with like you can't touch the outside of the ruin to see through windows, is a bit different to I think most other sets as far as I'm aware. And then there's a contrast there. How are you doing that with your terrain?
You're totally right. So there is a contrast. We've adopted the WTC FAQ as a basis, so we follow the same premises as if you're not on the base, you can't shoot. However, most people aren't aware of this, and it's actually in the most recent FAQ. They made it so that if you have breachable infantry or swarm, or like the main things that can move through walls and stuff, you can actually just have your model over the ruin, so you can peek your arm through like the window or whatnot if you're not on the base to shoot through it. So that still is allowed under our stuff through the middle for a lot of our WTC ruins. However, we do like having a mix of essentially the 1-inch bases where you have half an inch outside the wall and half an inch inside, mainly back towards the deployment zone or on the corner objectives, and making the center a little bit safer, so you can't just get like stage and then get pushed into and shot off to prevent that. So it kind of has a bit of dichotomy to make it good for both army playstyles.
Right, yeah. So you're just straight up using some of the ruins will have bases and windows and stuff, right? So you can be like you can be up close in the corner and be like, cool, we're safe, but if someone comes and stands like an inch away and touches the space, we can get shot through the wall. But you put those further away from the center, so you can't have like a knight straddling two centerpieces with their big oval base and be like, cool, the table is open.
Correct.
Is that about right?
Yeah, that's 100%. One of the big concerns I had is being a knight player primarily at the moment is guard. Firstly, just rolling Lehman Russes up and touching and blasting, but also Tau. So just trying to work those factors in, and I'm not gonna lie, I spent like 6 hours trying to like figure out how to do this and optimize it, and it worked out pretty well. So we've got some decent maps at the moment. We'll be expanding that for our GTs and our majors later in the year, but. Yeah, we'll see what 10th brings, but obscuring hopefully is still a thing, and you can still use the bases to hide. So yeah,
that's really cool.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And so you said you talked about the event earlier this year says TNA Open. So when is it, and like when will tickets be available? So we have Timmy the Sorcerer asking.
Good old Tim, how you doing, man? Yeah, look, we are actually finalizing the plan at the moment. So Reese, the other head of, one of the president of TNA, he's amazing at project planning. Like, we would not exist without him. I manage the money stuff, but I mainly do the competitive stuff at the moment. But he's worked on this project plan. We've got a new venue that we're trying out really close to the airport. Hopefully we'll be open for tickets in March is the idea. We want to try and give people quite a bit of time to plan their trip, because we are going for 3 days. Like 140 player base is what we're aiming at, but if we get enough interest, we're actually going to have room to expand that to a larger basis up to potentially like 180, terrain permitting and things like that. But yeah, at the moment the event will be the first week end of November, and yeah, so we'll be in 10th, which will be interesting. So there's a few things we got to try and work with there, and we won't know until later in the day. But yeah, we're going to get tickets out soon. I know Benny Way's got a few boys interested from New South. I know there's some New Zealanders interested, and for most of the states, have got some people interested. Potentially some international people too. We'll see. So, but yeah, it'll be a good event. Hopefully, we're trying to make it the essentially the biannual uprising that you come to Queensland for, in the bit of a beach trip as well. So, yeah.
Fantastic. And you know this boy loves terrain when he's got terrain holding in his hand, left hand.
Yeah.
Together.
Yeah, look, I was ripping it off to make some scenic bases for the Knights. So, yeah.
Classic Knight player move, being like, oh, yeah, no, there's too much terrain here. Let's rip it up. But basing though.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Oh, too good.
What's the next bullet point, Sam?
Well, we've also got Benny Wade who joined us. How you doing, buddy?
I'm good. Sorry to crash in there.
Yeah,
No, you're
that's
all
great.
good,
We'll
buddy.
bump the recording back 15 to give him a bedtime buffer for the kids, and he
Yeah,
still
there you
managed to
go.
be like, "Nah, it's
There
fine,
you
mate.
go.
We're still gonna."
Nah, they're just getting older now. They're just playing up. You know, they get overtired.
We need a.
So
I think what we need to do is we need to set the actual recording time 15 minutes earlier, so then you're like, "Oh, go, quick! I really got to go!" Right? And then when that takes
Yeah.
15 minutes more than planned for you, you actually show up on time.
I've tried that with the kids, but they don't care. They care nothing for little man's podcasts, as they call them. So
That's fair.
Oh, too good. The apple doesn't fall far from the tree. Then obviously, Benny, like you weren't a rascal at all, but as a kid, were you? No, not
Sorry.
once.
no, I was well behaved.
As a kid, that implies you
law-abiding,
stopped.
law-abiding citizen. I still am, Towse. No matter what you say
Oh,
about
I
me,
don't know, mate. I've heard some pretty crazy stories from you, Benny.
Yeah. Oh, look, how crazy they can get, really.
That's
but
fair.
you know, how you going, Will? It's good to see you, mate.
Yeah, good, man. Good to see you too. Yeah, excited to be here and chatting with you boys about the
awesome.
Queensland 40K scene. So yeah,
I did hear you were talk. I did come in a bit when you were talking about terrain. I did make a promise to the lads that I wouldn't derail it on entry, and I nearly went, yeah, that's right, because you're a night player like that, you know, in the middle of it. But I thought I'd better stop, so I'm trying to turn over a new
mate,
leaf here.
you should have.
Yeah.
I do not mind at all. That would have been
That's right. Will's in good company. I got your back,
No.
buddy.
I usually derail them when I come in too late. So to be honest, it's just best that I tried to stay professional for you, Will.
Because
so
we're definitely not derailed right now.
took every ounce of my being to get to that point. So I'm all exhausted now. I've got nothing left.
There you go,
Too
mate.
Too good. See, it really obviously sounds like you guys run a great bunch of events, and obviously in the Queensland zone, you've mentioned him a bunch of times now. Josh McGowan's, people aren't aware, Josh McGowan's like the Queensland rep, so each state territory has like a representative, and Josh McGowan's one of the main people who runs actually a bunch of events in Queensland and helps administer the Queensland event page. So, as an event organizer in Queensland, like what is one thing you think you guys do that's really well, and other states or territories should adapt with their events? So, if anything at all.
Yeah, okay. So one of the key things we do is, I'd hope most other places do this, but we work quite closely together. Like we have our own TO chat for Queensland, and we work pretty hard to make sure we have not necessarily standardized terrain, but like standardized rulings and understandings of stuff. And if people have a question, we can like pop that in the group and go, hey guys, like what's happening here? Like how does this work that way? Instead of having to rely on potentially third-party resources to work that out, like we can kind of work as a community. And also like with the rollover from down under pairings into BCP, a lot of the guys didn't understand how that worked. So we had the ability to go, if like I was at an event and I had a bit more experience at BCP, I'd be like, hey, John Davidson, here, if you need help with this, we can do X, Y, Z. Or if we had a problem with like sponsors, we can talk to like, who do you use for this and how do we do that? So we work quite closely together as a community. It's not down under 40K tournament circuit level where everyone works together super close, but we do pool resources and we want to make sure we have our own space and work together with the community to make events to the best we can for the local people. So, yeah.
Fair enough. More than fair. So there are some wise words and things we can hopefully improve and see in other states and territories. So I think we forget to mention, but since I think we last recorded, we also had the WTC coaches and the full roster announced. So obviously, Will, you're a WTC player for the upcoming 2023 season, but we also have the living legend, the big cat, Ben Way, as a WTC coach. Congratulations, buddy. Round of applause.
Thank you. But massive congratulations to Will for making the playing team.
Oh, thanks, man.
I'll be looking forward to waiting on you hand and foot, Will. So
yeah, mate, I'm going to make you get me beers every 5 minutes, right? I'm just going to be past it while I'm trying to win.
I'll be getting fit. So that's good. That's good. No, but seriously,
right.
I'm pretty proud and feel very grateful and honoured, honestly, to be coaching for the lads. So
the War Master will rally the troops.
Yeah, that's it.
I'm looking forward to having you there, Benny. Like the team is definitely a lot stronger with you there, and you're going to be great support. So I'm looking, be great
thanks,
time,
mate. You're too kind. You're too kind.
Yeah, and so the team has expanded. So I think it was 3 or 4 coaches last year. Now we've gone to 5 coaches, which is amazing. Like it's going to have more than 1 to every 2 tables.
Yeah, we had an extra
last
coach.
year because it was it was like there was a coach between every table. Sorry, Will.
That's right. Yeah, I was just saying we had an extra coach mainly because we want one per table to kind of keep an eye on, games and things like that, but also to have a floater if they need to check how rounds are going and items like that. Just general admin and things like that. So it's a good idea. We'll see how it goes, but yeah.
Yeah, and so people who are unaware, so maybe Willie can explain as well. So obviously part of Queensland, like a lot of the WTC team from this past year was based in Queensland, and you were there for testing days and stuff like that. So what was that process like, and like how informative was it for you, like seeing that process?
Yeah, look, it was pretty wild, man. I'm not gonna lie. It was some of the best fun I've had playing 40k. Look, I love playing events. I spent a lot of time traveling around Australia playing events last year. But man, like to walk into a room, especially at Eric's place or Simon's place, when we had like Solly and Chris Wright, and McMillan and all the other boys travel up. It was wild to have the collection of some of the best players in the world right here. I had the pleasure of helping Matt Jackson understand what knights do, because he was between CK and he kind of saw what Imperial Knights was doing, and I'm like, I was playing Eric, and he's like, oh, that looks kind of cool. What's this bondsman ability that does -1 damage? So he kind of flipped to them a bit last minute, but ended up doing within reason pretty well, considering the list was put together quite quickly for him. And it was awesome to see. Essentially, Eric was playing like 2 games at a time. Simon was playing 2 games at a time. Ducky was testing Towse and everything. We had boys from the Queensland team, all the scene in general, just coming over and playing games with different WTC lists into each other to go, how does this matchup work? So I think at one time we had like maybe 15, 20 people at like Simon's house, just like with like tables out and terrain out. There's armies out everywhere, just trying to understand the meta and trying to find the unique little tools that we can use to get an edge. And it worked clearly based on how we went, especially with like Eric's list and Liam's list. So yeah.
What's that process like? So, like, obviously, you said there's a bunch of people around, there's terrains and tables and stuff like that. But, like, what's that process like? Is it obviously, so for people who aren't aware, like, when WTC announced they would use Nephilim packs, obviously, it's quite a while back, but literally, Nephilim just dropped, and it was 1 or 2 weeks before lists had to be submitted for WTC and, like, played. Was that correct? I think it was 1 or 2 weeks.
Yeah, it wasn't long. I don't remember the exact time period, but it was quite quick. Look. The thing is, like, I'm sure you've heard this before, but Australians are pretty good at kind of finding that unique little tool in the meta when things flip on its head for it to work well. We'll be relying on 10th edition for this year as well, to be honest. And like, kind of seeing, like, so a lot of these lists that these guys took had been in the works for a little while. Like, we're not talking like it's immediately like Nephilim hits, they're like rushing to do it, but like Eric and Simon were working on GSC for quite a while. Like, we took GSC to ATC that last year. And that was with Ridge Runner spam and a bit of combat and multiple Patriarchs and like triple patrol. This, like, building on that, Simon did really well. He performed really well team-wise, and we realized GSC is actually quite a bit of a rock. This is just the easiest way to explain the process, right? And he then gave it over to Eric, and Eric's like, oh, let's see if I can find something else. And it's like, what's the new mechanic in the book? Well, the new mechanic is crossfire tokens, right? And like, people were still trying to do combat GSC and it wasn't working. And then he's like, oh, these jackals are kind of cool. And then he realized even later, oh, these neophytes are kind of wild when you give all this strength 4 and all these flamers, +1 a wound, +1 hit, ignore cover, right? And reroll 1s. So he's like building on the strengths of the book and just finding all these small things. So that process was built over probably 3 to 4 months, starting with ATC prep. Like, we're essentially starting like kind of at WTC prep now, as much as we're not actually prepping for the same reason. But we're looking at, like, how do these mechanics work? What's the little things where we can get them to go that extra little mile? And what is something that people will look at and think it's, kind of like trash, but it's another man's treasure? Like, how can we find these things to flip matchups?
Yeah, fantastic. And like you said, you explore some tech and explore some things as well like that. So how does that sort of evolve now? So heading into this year's upcoming WTC, maybe, I don't know, Ben, what's been some insights you've seen, like, heading into the prep? So obviously you guys are looking to defend the title, and it's going to be a bigger target on your backs for sure. So people, obviously in the past, maybe disrespected Australia to an extent. Obviously you were a good enough player, but maybe weren't as like a higher priority. But I'm sure heading into this year, you're going to have a much bigger target on your backs. So Ben, like, what do you think some of the prep is and heading into this year, and like, what does it look like from your end?
From my end as a coach, like gathering data and stuff like that, isn't going to obviously be pretty as relevant until all of a sudden is, and then it is going to be extremely relevant. And I think a lot of it's going to have to be obviously we'll start off with a bit of I'm sure we'll get some sort of leaks, so there'll be some theoretical there. But then as soon as we get into actually playing it, a lot of it's going to be reporting back to Liam and the other players and talking about matches we've had and what we think's worth. Because it's, you know, it's not just like faction stuff; it's like actually playing the game and learning the game. Obviously, they don't change the movement of a Space Marine very often and stuff like that. So there's obviously transferable skills. So I think the most important thing is probably match fitness, really. Keeping on top of your game currently where you're at. Like, you can't worry about something until it's worth worrying about. Like, until you can actually physically worry about it in front of you, until you've got a book and you're like, right, I need to learn this right now. So just keeping match fitness, keeping discussions open, really good communication, talking about what you like, figuring each other out. I think is probably really important. Figuring out what kind of how we each play the game. Like, from a coach's, like, from my perspective, is figuring out the boys, you know, and just making sure, you know, and just making sure I can get my head around what they can do. I know Liam knows all about them, and a few of the guys who play regularly already know each other really well. But yeah, I think it's more about just match fitness and just making sure the communication's strong and the bonds are strong, so we can when we have to flip, we kind of know kind of what angle each of us are coming from in discussions when we're talking about theoreticals and stuff like that. So
will you be doing stuff as well, like working out who's flexible, who wants to go like play aggressive stuff, who scraps the points, that sort of thing? Or have you guys already sort of got that down from just the like when you're building the team?
Well, we can't. Oh, sorry.
No, you go, mate. You go. I would say, man, like, we do have particular players that are good at those certain things, like the good old Soli Selly, but at the same time, also armies are up in the air. Like, it's a new edition. Like, factions are going to change, things are going to change, and we have people that are good on certain things. I know some people say that there's no such thing as a faction specialist, but I think there is within reason, right? Like, armies generally play pretty similar, so we'll just have to wait and see. But what do you think, Benny?
Oh, it's pretty much what I was going to say. Really, was like on that. It's hard to, like, there could be some real big fundamental changes that we're going to come across. I know we've seen leaks, but I always try not to read too much into leaks. There's never any never any context at all. Context. There's no context for it. A lot of it either, is there? You know, like, especially the minute stuff they talk about, like little changes. So I prefer when, you know. I'm pretty good at, like, not worrying about things until actually, you know, it's time, until I know things are concrete. So it's pretty hard, right? Like, I think you just got to keep practiced. So
you've talked about a couple of times here, like match fitness and keep playing, practicing, but like, you guys are playing a new edition. So why is it important between now and potentially new edition, quote unquote, new edition coming out? Why is it important to keep playing? Like, maybe you can answer. Like, why do you think it's important to keep playing and keep, I guess, your match fitness up effectively?
Yeah, look, it's like anything, man. Like, you got to stay sharp on the ball. Like, if you are in a career, like, even if you're not doing that exact task, it's good to have an idea of how it works, right? And like, we could totally go, let's take the pedal off right now. But when we jump into 10th, we only have, I think, like 2 to 3 weeks after the edition releases to get lists in, to release heading over, right? So we can't just, like, drop the ball, because, like, it's still a dice game. It's still the same fundamental characteristics, and, like, we got to be sharp at the end of the day, and we're going to need that even more, right? Because we got to look at the things that have changed and try and understand them to the highest point. And if we're trying to, like, go, oh, what's the movement of this again, because we're trying different armies and different combos, like, we can't really have that, right? Like, we got to be, like, primed and ready to just hit it hard. And the only way to have that is to play with what we've got. And, like, 9th is still an amazing rule set. I don't know how far they'll be changing it, but the fundamentals will remain the same, and that's the primary reason.
Yeah, more than fair.
Yeah, Benny. Yeah, I think it's about, like, just keeping some. Sorry, I'm getting the old Madawi lag, but not for much longer. But I think it's a lot about, like, keeping those thought pathways open and kind of practicing how, like, learning how each other think about the game. Because I know that, like, after speaking to Towse about when he plays like his armies, and Sam and anyone, that everyone thinks about the game a little bit differently, and there's value in all of that. So I think it's about practicing that. So you're like, just, you know, you're exercised in kind of, and people, you've exemplified, like, kind of how you play the game enough to people around you, so people can understand understand when we flip kind of roles and natural things and kind of angles when people give opinions on things. It's really good to know kind of like, well, that person plays very like cagey games, so you know that's kind of why they're picking up on this and seeing this secondary from a different viewpoint rather than when you know someone would see it from aggressive point. So I think there's quite a lot of value in making sure that you keep practice and you're just communicating how you feel about the game.
Yeah, fantastic. That sounds awesome. When you guys have your practice days, obviously in the Queensland environment, also like WTC environment, how's your practice days or like practice situations sort of handled? Like we always hear about some people like play 1 to 2 turns, re-rack, and then think about it or like talk out the last couple of games. Is that generally how things happen, or is it you play through a full game or you put through different scenarios? Like how is it sort of structured in terms of practice?
Yeah, so it kind of varies based on what we're trying to do. If we're just trying to, like, it depends on the flow of the game, like, is what I would naturally say. Like, if we're just trying to test how tech works, we'll probably play it out just to try and get an understanding of, like, if an army has, like, Dark Angels, for example, has a lot of changes recently. We'll see how that goes, and we'll feel it out. Like, if it's doing well, if it's keeping strong in the secondaries, we'll probably just go, okay, we can call the game here. We can kind of review the score. However, if you have something that's, like, a late game scorer, say, like, Kaoyun Tao and stuff with like decisive action and those things. It's like, okay, well, let's play this out. Let's see, like, you know, you're getting smashed on the scoreboard. Does that happen in another 2 turns? But again, it's everything. Like, we're just trying to get reps in for yourself personally to practice in terms of like deployment and tactics and staging. Probably only play 1 or 2 rounds, but a lot of the guys play 4 games out or play to like round 4, round 5 and talk it out from there.
Yeah, that carry on tower thing's real good. It just made me think of like, you know, if you take bad data, like analysis sort of practices of, yeah, I took carry on tower. Decisive action's rubbish. We react turn 2 every game. I never scored a point on it. It's like, you know, you can make some really bad decisions if you just like, oh, I think this is lost, and don't try and like see what happens at the back end of things.
More than fair, absolutely. No, it's good. Like as you said, you got to sort of adjust your practice to what your situation is. So, I guess we have a question in the chat. So from Daz himself, but we know it's Mr. Dale. So Ben, how much are you learning that could bring New South Wales for ATC victory? So ANZ team champs in May, and also you're a coach for the New South Wales team as well. So get some early prep in for WTC. So, what are some extra things you can learn for New South Wales victory?
I leave that all to the captains. That one. They're the magicians there. I just set it up. I just set it up for them. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously Josh McMillan, so another player, so for the WTC team. So yeah, fantastic. So we talked about, we alluded to before. So First Blood was like your first Queensland like big event that's happened. So using Arthur Omen and stuff like that. So tell us a bit about the event, Will. So how many players? Obviously we saw the terrain and stuff like that. What was it like all about, and like how was the response for it?
Yeah, man. So we ran First Blood last year. It was kind of like a capstone, or I guess an initial stone into the new mission pack for the year. So we did it post Uprising, and we were like, okay, let's repeat that this year. Spoiler: Uprising decided to go with a new mission pack, so we couldn't even use it as like a testing thing. Like last time we did this, we didn't even have the book. We had like printouts of the leaks for people to test how to play and stuff like that. But you know, that's okay. We got about 40 players the first time we did it. Like we were kind of selling tickets on and off for like a couple of weeks. This year, we had 60 players sign up within 2 days of the tickets launching. And then we're like, okay, we need to put a cap on this, because we actually uncapped it because we didn't think it was going to be that high. And ended up having like 80 something players in total, like, well, 20 people on the waiting list. And we had a lot of people filter through because, like, you know, it's an RTT, people have stuff come up. So yeah, it was a massive event. We ran it at Club Pine. Pine Rivers, that's where we run a lot of our events. It's a really lovely bowls club up here. We got a little room upstairs, which is a bar, fully air-conned. It's got a stage. It's a really good spot, and they do a really cool thing where we can pre-order meals for lunch, where you can, like, when you buy your ticket, you give us your meal, and like it'll come out at 11:45, 15 minutes before the round finishes. So you can get downstairs, smash out your palmy with your beer, come back up and jump back in for round 2. So it works pretty well. The event itself, we got to see kind of the new meta developing. A lot of Dark Angels coming in, a lot of guards starting to come in. We just ran guard as is, even though a lot of places still weren't kind of running it yet. We'll let it in, see what happens. And it worked well. Like the guard, they performed reasonably well, but they didn't smash people off the board. Obviously, Stodes were there. Mr. Hackett himself, but he had a bit of a hard game, so he didn't end up getting on the podium at all at the end. But the Votan actually, Votan, we had 4 or 5 Votan players come along. We had quite a few starting to get in there, so that was a new interesting one. Like they haven't been doing too well in Queensland so far, but they did okay at the event itself. Like the land forts are pretty good at just pushing to the center and then keeping people away from the central objectives. So yeah.
Do you want to just quickly share, because I don't think we've covered it yet, the rundown of like who took it out with what armies and factions, that sort of deal?
Yeah, totally. So we had, I can't remember his last name. It's David. David was at the Queensland Masters last year. He was playing Chaos Knights, 13 Armigers, as you would probably know very well, Towse. He ended up going first. He was actually, interesting game, was playing Ben Warrior, the AdMech man himself.
Ben, are we having like flashbacks or something?
Yeah. Well, he was playing they were playing first and second, essentially. We didn't lock the top because we had so many players. Like, we'd have like 8 undefeated, so it wasn't going to really work. But they were playing first and second into the final round. And Ben and I have played this game before, being a Knights player, and being a bit of a favour in the Knights matchup. And Mac don't like Knights. And he was pretty confident he'd put enough tech in his list to counter the Knights, even CK, especially without the -1 damage to the 4-up inbound in combat. I think David nearly tabled him by about turn 3. Like Ben put up a really good fight, but the AdMech just ran out of gas. So while they're improved quite a bit, they're still not this like all encompassing. I'm just gonna like table you and win thing when they came out initially. In second place we had Micah, I believe, with Micah Burnoff with Tau. He was running, or I can't remember exactly his list because I don't like looking at Tau as a Knights player. They kind of scare me a little bit. But
look, it's a Tau list. You can just be like, what 2 types of commanders? How many Riptides? How many Hammerheads? How many Crisis Suits? How many Breach of Fish? Right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
But he did pretty well across the event. He obviously scored quite high and had some good matchups. And he's also a little bit of a local gun. He's been doing quite well locally. And then I ended up in third because I ended up playing the Knights mirror in round 3. Thanks, boys. And old mate had it was 2 big Knights versus 1 big Knight, and it's like, well, who runs out of armigers first? And the answer is the 1 in 10 doesn't. So they kind of get the board control. So
yeah,
it was a good
often feels like the Knights mirror thing. It's like it's like you win that to some extent in the list building phase of haha, I brought more small Knights than you did. Yeah.
Yeah, it's how many Hunters of Beast Helverins can you get that do 4 damage into +1 to wound, auto 26s, +1 to hit? And it's like, oh, okay, well, 2 of these kills a big Knight. So what do you do?
Yeah.
More than fair. And it sounds like it was a great event. So obviously it was run through TNA, so the Northside Alliance. So what's the Northside Alliance about? So obviously, hint, it might be the north side of Brisbane. Like, but what more goes into it, and etc.
Yeah, man. So
Alliance, that's the third word in there, Sam.
There you go. So the Northside Alliance is essentially it's a community of gamers. We're an NFP, so non-for-profit. We're ran by players for players. Kind of a joke is there was 2 clubs. One was called the Northern Knights. The other one was called the Bray Park Alliance. They both kind of feeded out of existence, and we decided to merge the name together and go with that and end up the Northside Alliance. So pretty much we run a few one-day events a year. A GT, which is going to WTC sponsorship this year in June, if anyone's kind of keen to come and visit that. And then TNAO in September, which is a big one. Every week, though, we'd run Friday nights locally in Pine Rivers. We get between 15 to 25 people. And Sam came along to his first one the other week, and I hope he had a good time. But we kind of use a mix of competitive terrain, and we have a range of players from quite casual and new players to quite competitive veteran players. Like, there's guys there that have been playing nearly longer than I've been alive, type of thing. So that we got a really good mix of dudes, and very very community focused, friendly focused, and we'll have a good time, have a game with you, have some drinks. So yeah.
Is that Friday night thing? Is that at your same bowls club? Do you have like a regular standing agreement or space or something like that?
It is a different spot. The current spot is at Marumba Downs at the John Oxley Hall. However, we have a new venue coming because we've kind of outgrown it because we've been there for 2 years now. The new venue will be air-conned. It will have a bar. We're still confirming it, so I can't say anything just yet. But it's going to be pretty close to the Bowls Club. And if people are keen, you should really come along. Just we got a Discord. That's how we run everything. And one of our big points, is pre-set up matches. So we don't want people to rock into a store type of thing and be like, oh, I got to ask this person for a game, or I don't have one set up. We go, hey, are you guys keen on Thursday or Wednesday? And then we'll sign up, and then we'll pre-match them based on if they want a casual game or a competitive game, or if it's their first time, we'll do an intro game. And if we're doing a league, like we do narrative leagues, sometimes we do competitive leagues. We did a Highlander league one time where you can only have one of each type of unit. So all the different flavors of the hobby, and we got some really good painters too. So and AOS is starting to become a thing. So like it's just a general good tabletop gaming community that everyone gets along in. So yeah,
nice, and is absolutely unbiased, of course.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
From one experiences, I had a really good time at Friday night, so it was a really good environment. And like it's just a good club night and like good groups of people. So, but also in Queensland, obviously there's a bunch of other clubs and stuff. So obviously you hear about some minor podcasts and normal blokes. I don't know. So got
never heard of them.
Never heard of them.
Never heard of it.
No. Yeah. Anyways, so obviously the normal blokes, and there's a couple of others. So there's like some people out from Toowoomba and stuff like that. So is that sort of how Queensland sort of run? Is like how there's like a bunch of clubs and you sort of all have the nights, or are you guys sort of unique in that aspect?
So yeah, that's a really good question, mate. So initially, a lot of the other clubs are actually more social groups. More so like TNB doesn't have official club nights. They're kind of more of a group that interact together and play games with each other. Low Rollers, which has just kind of started up in the last year down at Annerley. They copy our kind of method because it was quite successful, and they're doing pretty well with it. They do matchups pre-existing, and they're in the city. So we're about 40 minutes north of the city, so it's good for the city folk. And then Toowoomba, you have I can't remember the name of it. Sorry, you'd have to ask Josh. But AK has a store up there, and they do kind of a similar thing of they have it one night a week, and then down the Gold Coast they have the Drop Bears, and they do the equivalent of let's meet up on Facebook and organize a game at the local store. So yeah, we have a lot of different seeded clubs that play together, and then when we go to events, we obviously interact with each other at a higher level. Then
nice.
Fantastic. And I also understand, obviously, you get some local stores as well. So, obviously, from the sound of things, some things are run like independent venues and stuff like that. But you also have local game stores, which help sponsor clubs and stuff like that. And you also help host, or some host events from there. So, what are some of your like local sponsors or LGSs in the area?
Yeah. So, the big one for us personally for Northside Alliance, and also for Team Australia now, one of our major sponsors, is Wargamers Hub, run by John up at Morayfield. They're even further north of us than we are at Brisbane. But man, they have an awesome online store. They really look after us, and they again really community focused in the way they kind of support events. Like John's obviously there to run a business, but he's also like, I want to make. He's a tabletop gamer at heart. He wants people to have fun. He wants those prize support to be there. Where the Annerley guys run out of is Comics Plus or Ace Comics. They've kind of name changed recently, and that's a really good local store. The other one is Irresistible Force down the Gold Coast. Those guys kind of like have their own kind of few chains of stores down there. And that's the main ones around Brizzy at the moment. So yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, fantastic. Also, so obviously we talked about, also touched on a bit before, so backtrack a little bit, but obviously you have AZTC coming up in May, and you're playing as a player there. So what are some of like your expectations heading in for the next big teams tournament? Because I imagine that's your next big focus, is that event.
Yeah. So ATC is kind of what we're building towards. To be flat with you, honestly, ATC to me at the moment it's an amazing thing, and I'm really excited to actually be on the playing lineup. But it's kind of another step towards WTC in a way. Like it's a chance to test, not necessarily the lists because it'll be different, right? But the process and test your mettle against other really good players from around Australia. A few of us had the opportunity to do that quite a bit, but obviously some states don't get to travel. They don't get to go and play those other high-level players from around Australia. So it's a good chance to do that. My expectations personally is I would like to just perform well, like within expectations, like trying to tuning the prediction on matchups to like red, green, yellow with traffic light system, as you guys know it, and get that really fine-tuned in. Regardless of win or lose, that's kind of my aim, is to get that tuned in, get myself tuned in to a point where I can try and flip matchups and push back where I can. And ATC is a good platform to do it.
Yeah, fantastic. So is that part of the obviously changing from last year into this year with WTC? Is that sort of some of your expectations or hopes, like to change it to sort of refine that traffic light system and like refine your predictions, or is there some maybe other things that you're looking to improve as a team from last year into this year?
So we have had quite a bit of a team change from last year to this year. Last year it was quite normal blokes heavy. This year we've only got 1 or 2 members from the normal blokes, so it's a bit wider community. We've got Eric Luthuros as captaining this year, whereas last year was Denise. We've also got the Merc squad, which is actually quite a lot of newer guys and some of the TMB boys as well that are helping out with that. So one of the goals for us is we want to try and be the best players we can, be the best we can in general, because we want to push the rest of Australia to be a higher level. And the best way to do that is to go, how do we push harder and harder and harder to make these guys chase us, to make us chase them? Our last round into WA last year was pretty close. And we really wanted to, it's good to have close games, but we want to try and make that not close. Not because we just want to win, but because we want Australia to push even harder, to just get better. So, as more over the years, as people who go to WTC or to other international events, they can go, oh, these guys are from Australia, they play in the ANZTC. Oh, these guys are very good, regardless of who it is or where they come from.
Yeah. Are you because when you mentioned that you've changed up the team a fair bit, is there reasoning behind that? Like, are there people that are veterans that are standing down to let other people sort of come in and learn, get their toes wet, sort of thing, or is it like, because it's not, you guys are hosting the ANZTC this year, right? So it's not like
Correct.
it's sort of suddenly you can't afford to travel within the same state. Is that one of the reasons for the change of roster?
Look, primarily, mate, it actually comes from a change of leadership. Like, Eric's taking a bit more of a primary role this year, and he really wanted to build back towards into a kind of a stronger team in that regard. Like, not that the team last year was weak, but more so just the way the team focused, the way the team trained, and the approach was slightly different. He's not going to WTC, even though he's the former Australian captain. He's like, let's try and hone this back home, so the boys are ready for next year, in a way, for 2024, in a way.
Yeah, so they've got the big boss captain, because he's like, all right, WTS was great, but we'll just take a step back. We'll level down a little bit and go for just the local one.
Yeah, that's exactly it. So yeah, just trying to keep it competitive. We're keen to have New South Wales, ACT boys, and I believe the UNZ boys are coming across too, right, mate? It'll be good to have you all over here.
Yeah, look, I'm meant to be going. We had 4 of us from the South team sort of organised from the South Island, and there was meant to be the sort of northern contingent of the southern team had, I think there was some people moving away, and basically like reasonable but real life stuff got in the way. So we're a little bit trying to work out the rest of the team, but we have intentions to come over and have the NZ South team. It's just we've ended up with myself in a leadership position, and I'm great at doing things and making stuff happen on the day. Less great at some of the admin. I actually got pinged partway through the show by John, who's meant to be on the team, saying like, "Hey, is this document that I set that he sent to try and organize things look good?" I'm like, "We're getting there." But yeah, no. And I believe there's a northern contingent that's a bit more onto it, and I imagine that'll have a Kraken wargaming heavy component to it. So, yeah.
Well, you have to do some last minute prep, and someone who knows about last minute prep, a little tangent. So, Will, you were at the ANZTC last year. You were supposed to attend as a coach, but you had to step in last minute. So maybe explain the story. And,
Tell it, Will. It doesn't get boring,
all right.
Mate.
So,
it doesn't get boring.
It was wild, man. Like, for context, right? Like, I've gone to one interstate event at this point. Like, I've been playing competitively for maybe 13 months at most. I ended up, on the coaching spot, super pumped to be there, but I had no expectation, understanding what I was doing. I'm like kind of just being brought along for the ride. These guys are veterans. McGowan is taking guard, and he's won best in faction guard that year. He's pretty good with guard, even though they're down in the dumps. And he gets flooded in Toowoomba, the day of the time we're meant to fly down. So he's gone, "Oh, Will, you're going to have to play guard." Mate, I never shot a guard thing in my life. I'd only played melee up until that point, realistically. I had a few little shooting armies, but I'm like, what's a ballistic skill? How does range work, right? Like, I knew these things, but at the same time, I'm like, man, I had no clue how screens worked properly, because I was a little bit out of it, right? I'd always playing like elite melee or like Necrons or Custos, right? So it's completely different wheelhouse to the type of game that I go for. Anyway, we had to chuck together a proxy army, and thankfully Ben let it through with like Taroxes as Medusa batteries, and like all the battle tanks are slightly wrong. And yeah, just got chucked into the deep end. This is his NIDS drop, and I end up getting bust pretty heavily a lot of the time, which is completely fine, right? Like I expected that with the fact that I got to shoot 2 shooting phases as practice when we got there as a 2-hour accommodation, and like we had like knives and forks to like practice as terrain. It was so good. But Queens ended up still winning the event. Like I got put in the backpack and carried pretty heavily, but I still ended up winning, I think, 1 or 2 games with guard and tying one, so I was happy. We had George from New South ended up playing him and his Jukari, and it is the best story I think I'll have in 40k for a long time, unless something else happens. His Tantalus blew up, and because it lived on 1 wound, he overcharged it with Dark Techno. It blew up.
No, mate.
Yeah. And did D6 mortal wounds to like 6 or 7 different units, and did like, I think, 27 mortal wounds to his own army. And it went from being like, this is a close win, to like an 18-2. And it, like, I don't know, I think we still would have won the round, but it was just like, okay, like this is wild. Like, and it was a bit of a shocking moment. Like I've never had anything like that happen. So it was just pretty cool. Like I really felt like the guardsmen in the trench with the las gun, because like bugs were big at the time. That's when the Nid Codex dropped, and I ended up playing Nids. I'm like, what do I do? Like I had a Meliceptor 1-hit a bloody Lehman Russ in combat. I was just like, this is insane. So, but it was
this
an
is
awesome event.
like 9th ed full gas bugs, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It's like the codex is out. They haven't FAQ'd it.
I'm pretty sure Armor of Contempt came out about that balance update with Armor of Contempt. Armor of Contempt was about maybe like 4 weeks before the event. You reckon?
Yeah, it was like that. Like
from memory,
everything.
Like, might have even been 3 weeks.
Because they just slightly nerfed Tau and Custodes, because that's when Eldar are out, and you guys, like you still let them through. But do we have CSM? Yeah, we did have CSM because Soli was playing CSM.
We had old CSM.
Old CSM.
Yeah. Old.
But yeah, like, you got.
I was going to say, for context, like the TuneIn FAQ dropped the day of the event. Like, it was always listened and stuff that had been submitted, but the TuneIn FAQ had been dropped on the day of the event, and we still hadn't got the TuneIn book in Australia. But
so you're just sitting there getting tabled by the stuff, you know, and like, that shouldn't be able to do this anymore.
Yeah, pretty much, man. It was an awesome event, and you guys put on a great slam in the party down there in New South, man. Like, looking forward to your major that's coming up pretty soon. So it'll be a good time.
Okay, so just as well in last minute, like, does that just go hand in hand then? Because my single data point, which is of course reliable, is there was some last minute prep for Uprising as well. Just to check that one out. I've got your melter gun here, Will.
Oh yeah, sorry. I was like, what are you talking about? Oh bloody hell, yeah. So what Alex is referring to, guys, is I forgot a whole armature in Queensland. Like I thought it was just the weapons when I was taking it.
It was slightly better than that, yeah, because it was what, the night before or whatever. He's like freaking out and being like, I've got a knight here with no arms, and we're just like, and he was like, do I message the TO? Do I do this? I'm like, dude, it's a knight with no arms. People probably won't notice. I've got a spear melter gun for you. It'll be fine. And like, someone will have a weapon, or you don't worry about it. Or I was saying, like, the first time one of my knights dies, I'll like take the magnet off, walk over and go, here, have a melee weapon, right? And then I find out at the event the next morning from like one of the other guys from the crowd that like, so not only had he, like, Will got there, right, accidentally picked up the knight, which is what he was worrying about. He also, like, counting to 10's difficult for knight players, all right? Or,
yeah, it really is.
Or 11, depending on, right? He was like, cool, I'm playing the 110, right? I've got 10 knights here. Good. That was the 1 big knight and 9 of the 10 small knights that he was meant to have. But yeah.
Luckily, the New South boys, Jono hooked me up with some of the state boys down there, and they got me a Chaos Armager. So I had 1 Chaos Armager running around as Striking Shield in my list, but it was fine. Everyone didn't mind. So really thank and appreciate you trying to cover me there, Towse. I would have been screwed without that. I was very worried. So yeah.
Oh, too good. So what do you say? Obviously, you're thrown in the deep end there with the Imperial Guard, and it sounds like in testing and stuff like that, you sort of have to pick up armies which maybe you haven't played before, and you have to learn. Like, what are some of your tips or tricks for people who want to, like, have to pick up an army last minute and sort of understand it?
Yeah, okay. That's a good one. I haven't been asked that before. So I guess the main thing is looking at the fundamentals of the codex. Like, what are the core components that are similar to other dexes, and where does it vary? I guess the key example, I'm going to go back to GSC because it's all I think about at the moment because it's a pain in the ass to deal with. But, they primarily are focused on these tokens. You look at and like dropping in and ambushing and stuff like that. What else is focused on dropping in and playing interactive games? Well, Eldar doesn't like taking a hit. They like being non-interactive. They like trying to like move, shoot, move, which GSC have access to move, shoot, move. So if you can relate to an army that you have already played, it makes it quite a bit easier to understand the codex. But at the same time, every codex is still unique. So if you can kind of get a judge of like, okay, I know this melee profile in a Sane Guard comparatively kills like 2 to 3 Marines. I know that this rock cutter in this GSC Acolyte Bob will do a similar thing, right? So it's you can kind of relate that way. That's what I'd say. Primarily though, it's experience, right? Like end of the day, like if the more reps you have, the this is my first time around the wheel of the edition of like kind of seeing like the whole release go through. And you learn so much, and like things like, you know, there's no new things under the sun. Things slightly change from codex to codex. Like sure, like there was Crusher, but Crusher in new forms came in NIDS, right? Like you got what are they called? Carnifexes kept -1 damage, and you can get the Synaptic Imperative for the 4+ Invan on monsters. So it's still there, right? Like these things still happen, but the more experience, the more time you play, you kind of pick these things up. That's probably the best way I'd say to deal with it.
And
is
you see
experience.
stuff repeat, right? Like Blood
Yeah.
Tithe coming back for World Eaters and all that sort of.
Totally.
Yeah, that's the right one, right? Yeah.
Yeah, it
Yeah,
is.
you got it.
Yeah. So that's the main stuff. What about you guys?
What about it? Change it. Oh, I got a thing to add on this a little bit, because the one thing I know is, because you can, if you're hopping stuff between stuff, right, and this is for teams, it's one thing that experience brings that's massive. Maybe it doesn't make the biggest difference in game, but like predicting how things go is a thing that like experience helps massively with, because I know for the team events that I've done through TTS the past couple, I've like jumped onto a list and it gets to the pairings prediction, fill out your matrix, then I just look at these lists and I'm like, yep, yeah, those are some lists. I'll play some 40k into them, but I don't really know how this is gonna go. So I think that's like one big thing experience brings, because so I guess if you're going to army hop, right, if you can do something like, if you need to change quickly, see if you can get onto an army that someone experienced has written. And also if it's for like a teams thing, see if there's someone else that like, maybe even the person that wrote the list, because I imagine that's what you had, right? Well, is when you hopped onto the guard, you were still running the same list, so you had like pairings filled out by someone else. So maybe you like worsen things a little bit because it's you know, you're on your third shooting phase versus your 30th rep with the exact list or whatever, right?
McGowan actually hadn't done matchup, so I kind of had to fly by the seat of my pants a bit there. But,
oh no!
Luckily we had Deneth and Eric who would play a bit of guard, so they kind of guided me through like the expectations of stuff with that, which is pretty good. Like, especially when you lack that experience. These days it's a lot easier because I do, like, you gain the experience from playing, and it's like, I can kind of you can look for the pattern is kind of the best way to look at you. With pattern recognition, this World Eater unit, it's new, but you roughly know what it does because it hits this hard and it does this much. So like, and it's this fast. So what's it comparable to? I don't know, Incubi, roughly, right? Or like with Draz there nearby. So you can kind of get an estimation.
8-pounder possessed, but they hit some percentage harder, but they still die the same.
Exactly.
Or that sort of thing, right? Or like, yeah.
No. I was going to say more than fair. Like, did you sort of try and touch to Josh McGowan, like, and ask how the army plays, or did you try and reach out to people who play Imperial Guard, and, like, get a feel for it, or were you just like had to read the codex and hope for the best?
Yeah, look, I've never read a codex so fast in my life. I'm not going to lie. Like, I was up all night reading that codex, and I spent like 2 hours on the phone, and I had Brian beside me taking notes from Josh of like how to play guard. And man, I still had no clue what I was doing properly. Like, by about game 3, I had a pretty good understanding. But like game 1, I believe I played Adam Davies, the from down in Tassie, legend of a bloke. I ended up getting a 10-10. I clocked out because it's guard shooting, and when you haven't shot guard shooting, you do. But if I didn't clock out, I would have won pretty convincingly. So I was pretty happy with how it went first game. So
yeah, nice work, dude.
More than fair. And we'll let some tips for people who need to pick up an army last minute and then understand it more. So, Benny, did you have any questions for Mr. Will Milton?
No, I don't. Actually, I do. So with Team Australia coming up, I've changed my mind. So with Team Australia coming up, obviously, you've had to focus on your factions and stuff. Have you picked up are there any factions that you would never ever touch? That you just be like, it doesn't matter if I'm on Team Australia, doesn't matter if I'm like whoever's asking me, I'm not going to touch that faction. You refuse to.
Right.
Yeah,
hurry up.
I do,
What
actually.
are they then?
Yeah, can you guess? I'm going to take a thing. Can you guess based on what we've been talking about?
I wonder. It's GSC, right?
Oh no, I would play GSC. I would. It's actually guard.
GSC?
It's guard. I wouldn't play guard.
God.
Yeah, I hate them, man. Like, I'm just like similar to Anthony Vanilla with like it's the NPC faction. I'm in the exact same boat. I'm like, what is these things doing in this space opera? These are just like humans that are like falling over and dying. I'm like, ironically, I actually don't mind playing against them that much these days, but like back previously, I was like, I hate this. This is dumb. Like, they're just like waves of humans that are just dying by the thousands. But I probably would if you convinced me very, very hard. Like, for the team, I'd take one, but I'm still like, I don't think I'd ever own one. So,
Will, have I shown you the picture of when I played the 13 War Dogs into literally 300 guardsmen?
No.
Okay, after the show.
Yeah, please do. That would be a very good time for your chain guns there, mate.
Yeah. Alrighty. Is guard the only one though? Is that the only Will Milton veto?
Look, I would have said Towse up until about 6 months ago. Like, I always had a bit of a dislike of the Bluefish boys, but then got to interact with Hayden Waldock and see the magic that Towse can pull out of everywhere, and I'm like, okay, these things are kind of cool. But other than that, man, like, I'm pretty willing to hop onto anything and give it a hot shot and give it a learn. Like, give me a couple of weeks, but I'll figure it out and do reasonably okay with it. Like, I've switched on to things like custodes and just different night lists and stuff like that pretty heavily, like crons as well. There's always a good reference point to see what other players are doing to do so with that. But I also find like using that as a basis and building on that after a few games of practicing with their list is a good way to kind of like master that yourself and give it your own flavor.
Just as a question that I've thought of now to cut Sam off as well, it's really important. Do you see yourself as like the sort of person who would like try and find a weird, like, what are your strengths in list building? Do you feel like you're good at tweaking a list? Like, maybe someone else has got something you like, okay, I'll take this as a building block, tweak it for like my preference or to do a certain job or something. Or do you think you're okay at the whole, like Erica did with GSC, trying to find like reinvent a book sort of thing? Do you have any thoughts on like you as a list writer?
Yeah, personally, man, I'm kind of in the middle. I'd say I'm not a master of either, but I'm kind of okay at both. Like, I can land on a reasonable list initially, but generally when I bounce it off someone else, I'll find something that's like maybe a slightly better basis. But then when you get into tech, there's some cool tech and knights that I found that other people weren't necessarily looking at. So I would definitely probably say I'm okay at both, but I'm better at finding the nuances in a matchup that make things flip that normally wouldn't flip.
Yeah, what's that process like for you, Will? So obviously you talked about discovering tech. So I know we had a discussion offline that literally, so obviously heading to WTC, Alex Harrison ran the 3-blade night list that you were like so close to actually finding for WTC. He's like, damn, like if only had a couple extra days, we'd actually found this, or you're just testing it. And you have to sort of adapt for your matchup. So you talk about sometimes like adapting your list to each matchup and just trying things out. What's that process like? Is it sort of like having some ideas and like, I have to solve this problem and I want to solve it by this way and putting it on the battlefield, or is it more conceptual than that?
Yeah, look, I think let's go off Knights because this is what I've been playing the most recently for the last 8 months, right? Knights is pretty limited in what it can do realistically. Like, it has quite a little, it's not limited in what it can do. It's limited in what it has access to. Like, when you come into tech, like, you have a Helverin, you have a, what do you call it, a Warglaive equivalent, and then you have a Morax, right, which has a few different weapon loadouts. Now, within that, where it gets technical is when you start to go on a free blade and you can go, okay, I can take different weapon combinations with different buffs to account for different situations. So the primary one, the best example of this is actually for Uprising. I didn't put my list in until we're at the airport the morning we were flying down because I kind of wanted to see where people's factions were kind of going before I did. I wasn't exactly looking at specific people, but just in general, right? I'm like, there's a few Stodes. There's a few Marines as expected. I'm like, well, I packed the Grav. I know that Grav, I've used previously, struggles with range. Most people take the counters double for blast, right? But I'm like, well, 30-inch Grav with plus 6 inches is actually pretty solid. And in a few of my games, it actually mattered because it meant that I could actually get range on things like Dark Angel's bikes or Inceptors, or even like Salamander aggressors and stuff. Whereas previously, I wouldn't be able to do that.
Eradicators would be a big one as well. Hey, 'cause,
Eradicators, exactly.
Imagine, yeah, I've got these Eradicators with their 24-inch range melter and their 5-inch move, and it's like, cool, dude.
Yeah.
Boom, I'm 30 away. Unlucky.
Exactly. So you get to actually, yeah. So what I mean, it's like 29 versus 30, right? So you can use that kind of that range thing. Like most people would just take, I believe it's unremitting for you get max shots if they have 6 models or more, right? And that's a good tech piece, but you kind of shoot it and die. And like realistically, 40k is about preservation of resources and doing the most with the least amount you can. And that little things like that. Like that's my most recent process of that. At the moment, I've actually switched. I've got a lightning lock split half melee in noble combatants, just to add a little bit of this. Like it's the same amount of shooting. It's not quite as efficient, but to have a little bit more combat back on the list as things like World Eaters are back in, Rough Riders are coming around, that type of stuff. So you'll have like one claw with a flamer, one lightning lock. So it can kind of do both roles instead of just being locked to a single like shooting or combat allocation.
Cool.
Fantastic. So to wrap things up, we've got to also ask some hypothetical, like long-term questions. And we have a question in chat, and maybe yourself, Benny Way, and yourself, Will, can answer. So maybe start with yourself, Ben. So what's the long-term vision for your events within the context of the Australian scene? So obviously, recently had the Warhammer Championships being out. So obviously, certain events are getting invites to attend the Warhammer Championships, and as well in Australia and the Oceania scene, we have the Oceanic Championship circuit. So where various events will get invited to a qualifiers per se, which will get a ticket to said Warhammer Champs. So I guess moving on from there, Ben, what's your long-term vision for your down to 40k events? Then maybe Will, you can touch on what the long-term vision is for Northside Alliance events.
Well, that's a difficult question. I think that because there's so many factors, right, and there's so many things that want to achieve about it. Really, like for us down on 40k, it's always been about the community. So it's always going to be about what can we do to bring people closer together, even if it's only for brief moments or digitally, in this like massive country we have, which everything's far away. So when everything we do is our content's Australia focused, literally is only really branched out in probably the last like 12 months, our content, and our events and stuff, like we are trying to reach out a lot more of those as well. Same thing, like we just want to make sure that we want to do our bit like everyone else is towards making the Australia scene what it deserves to be. And that's really, we're just a moving cog in that big machine. Like this, I can imagine Will, like, you guys, like Dale said, have hit the ground running, going into the season. Like, I've obviously heard of the Northside Alliance. I'm still at the, I think I'm still at the welcome page. Actually, I can't get past it on your Discord. Been there for ages.
I'll fix that for you, mate.
Cheers, mate. But anyway, but anyway, in all seriousness, like you guys have always been there, and you've gone like, I know you ran like your club nights and stuff like that, and your matchmaking. I already knew that was a thing, and it's more like you've just gone from like 0 to nothing. So like, what's the long term vision for Northside Alliance in like for your events and in your community?
Yeah, look, that's a good question, mate. So what I would say is we kind of have a bit of a dichotomy, right? Because we have a lot of dad gamers that love, they got a kid and they just want to play an RTT every now and again. So trying to hold the balance between, like we want TNAO to be one of the premier 3-day events in the Southern Hemisphere at some point. Like this year we're going for 140, 180-ish. Next year we go like 200 to 300. Would love to get that, right? And we really want to push that, so that hopefully one day New South Wales has an event like that size, and WA has an event that size, and we can start to attribute Australia to having a venue, a reasonable circuit that matches, or not necessarily matches because we won't have the population, but at least can compete with the UKTC, and like you look at the Frontline Gaming Circuit and the GW Open Circuit, and like TNA. Like we're kind of pushing through that towards that. There's a few of us that are, but at the same time, we want to keep it a bit grassroots. We want to have both. Like we want to have like you guys also down south have some really good RTTs you put on all the time. We still want to do that stuff. It's about having all levels of 40k at the end of the day. I think it's having a pathway, and as we're seeing with the WTC this year, there's doing quite a bit of fundraising so that in the future, as this path is laid and as influence of Australia grows and the community grows, we can go, here's little Timmy. He's like 18 years old or like 16 years old. Oh, he's kind of met like these cool Australian players that like maybe he's played or seen them in the store. How do I get to be like that? How do I grow to be a player, right? And that pathway's there. And that was laid already by people like Josh Diffie and previous guys before them. But like we would like to see that a bit more laid out clearly, I guess, is like that. That's what I'd like to see personally as a player.
Yeah, fantastic. And I think the scene's like quite, I mean, obviously it's been here for a while and it's growing rapidly though. Like obviously post-COVID, we have seen like a massive acceleration and increase of players like yourself, Phil, obviously who got into the game, started joining tournaments and getting involved in the scene. There's more and more events are popping up around the circuit and around all Australia, and just being selling out like crazy. So I think it'll be interesting to see how it all goes. And I think obviously one thing we should mention is there's actually like a new network that's supposed to be starting to stream actual games in New South Wales, and I think as the popularity of that thing happens, so we've structured like link in the description. So Australia's Tabletop Network. I think Benny, yourself, you'll be helping sometimes commentate some of those games, and I know, like, so there's been a collective of people who want to commentate and live stream games in Australia. So it's fantastic to see, and it'll be interesting to see how it goes over this next season. And I know, obviously, this Rails WTC, like the success that Australia has had in that at the event, it showed to Australians, oh, we are actually okay at this game. We can compete at the highest levels, and had like the most applicants ever. I think it was like over 80 or 100 or whatever. It was some insane amount. So, and I think it will just go from strength to strength to strength. So it's going to be interesting to see. Unfortunately, that's going to be us for tonight. But before we close things out, Will, do you have any final shout outs or plugs that you would like to say?
Yeah, first of all, I'd like to say Towse is right. It's a kind of a thing is like all ships rise with a high tide as things go higher, as he said at the start of the thing. But shout outs, obviously, I want to give you guys a shout out for having me on. Like, that's awesome. Really appreciate it, boys. It's great to come here and chat with you guys. TNB lads, the TNA itself, check us out on Facebook or on our Discord. And then Team Australia is the big one at the moment. If you guys are keen to support us, we've got donation pages up. We're doing a raffle that's coming up, and we're going to have 2 events that are going to go full fundraising to TA. We're trying to make it as streamlined as we can going forward. So if you guys, anyone's keen to support that, please check those pages out. Yeah.
Sam,
thanks for having me on, boys.
You'll do the thing and put the links in the places. Yeah,
absolutely. So I'll chuck links in the description for you, so you can join the Discord. So Discord's open for anyone to join, and the Northside Alliance Facebook page there, so it's available for anyone. And so for next week, we'll guys have an interview, hopefully with Luxembourg. So the time will be posted here shortly. So some combination of people will be there, and stay tuned for our next episode. So thanks everyone for tuning in. Have a good night. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.